Coming out, Laurie.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Shropshire Council's Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 19th of October. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and can I remind members to please identify your name and role before speaking so that it's clear to those watching the meeting as to who is speaking. Thank you very much. So, moving on to the agenda, just a couple of things to explain to you. You'll probably, those of you who are sharp and eagle-eyed will have noticed that actually we have two scrutiny items, one at item 4 and one at item 7. So we will skip item number 7 and we will allow Councillor Barrow to speak about her report in item 4, which is before the question time. Only Councillor Barrow has another appointment. So moving on to the agenda, apologies for absence. We have apologies for Councillor Richard Marshall, who unfortunately had a meeting arranged today before he became the new portfolio holder. And we've also got apologies from Councillor Rob Gittins, who sadly has had a family bereavement this morning. Item number 2, disclosable interests. Does anybody at Cabinet have any disclosable interests? Okay, thank you very much. Item number 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of September. I'm happy to propose those. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Ian Nellens, I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Nellens. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. So moving on to item number 4, which is the scrutiny item. Councillor Barrow is joining us online. Good morning. Over to you. You're on mute, Councillor Barrow.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for moving me forward on the agenda. I'm Joyce Barrow, Chair of the Place Overview Committee, and I've been asked to raise 2 items with you by the Place Overview Committee. These are the Waste Minimisation Strategy and the Signs and Banners Task and Finish Group. Regarding the Waste Minimisation Strategy, on the 29th of September, my committee considered a proposal for Shropshire Council to develop a waste minimisation strategy. As this proposal will be considered by Cabinet, the committee thought it would be useful for Cabinet to hear the thoughts of the Place Overview Committee. The committee agreed unanimously with the principle of a waste minimisation strategy. However, there were details within the report that the members of the committee disagreed on. The report contains a proposal to charge for green waste. Not every committee member agreed with this proposal. Some members noted that a recent government green paper proposed to subsidise local authorities to not charge for green waste. Although this had yet to become policy, it was felt that any proposal from Shropshire Council should wait until the government policy became clearer. The report makes the point that the free green waste collection is in part subsidised by residents who do not have gardens, and that an increase in the population of Shropshire would result in a greater cost for waste collection. The committee members did not entirely accept these arguments, noting that many other council services were not used universally. It was also noted that an increase in population would also result in an increase in council tax revenue. And finally, I, as Chair, pointed out that the local authority could not charge to collect food waste, meaning that any proposal to charge for green waste would require an additional collection stream for food waste. The report also contained a proposal to recruit 2 new members of staff to produce and put into action the proposed strategy. Some of the committee members approved of this proposal and accepted that reductions in waste would result in a reduction in charges for waste going to landfill or to the energy recovery facility in Shrewsbury. Other members were more sceptical and felt that residents would not agree to the local authority recruiting additional staff when finances were tight. Some members suggested a useful compromise might be to recruit staff on time-limited contracts in order to demonstrate their value in reducing the costs. And if I can move on to the Signs and Banners Task and Finish Group now. On July the 20th, I attended Cabinet to remind members of my committee's 2020 review of assorted street scene matters and the recommendations made within this review. Cabinet agreed that it would respond in writing to these recommendations. We have yet to receive a response from Cabinet, so I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you of these recommendations. The Place Overview Committee has recommended that Shropshire Council set and actively enforce a policy for A boards. The policy for A boards should include the regulations contained in the body of the report it presented. The cost of an A board permit should reflect the total cost of administering and enforcing the scheme. Shropshire Council consult with town and parish councils on supplementary policies on A boards for their local area. Shropshire Council proceed with its intention to increase its charges for pavement permits to a level that fully recovers the cost of administering and enforcing the scheme. These fees would then be subject to an annual review. Shropshire Council does not proceed with an additional cost recovery fee of £200 on new and annual renewals of pavement permits. We very much appreciate that council officers are stretched very thinly in these difficult times, but nonetheless, the committee would appreciate it hugely if it could receive a response to these recommendations in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrow. First, let me apologise that you've not had that response. What I will do is I will ask the new portfolio holder for regulatory services, Councillor Marshall, to respond to the scrutiny committee, but I will also ask him to speak to officers regarding formulating this policy. Going back to your comments regarding the waste minimisation strategy. Firstly, thank you for looking at this at your committee. For members who aren't familiar with this, this was one of our first forays into the green paper. So, i.e. it's a document that goes to the scrutiny committee before it's actually considered by Cabinet, because we wanted to get as much input in as possible. And I take on board the points you made. Councillor Nellens, I don't know if you want to come back in on any of those in particular.
Yeah, Councillor Nellens for the portfolio of climate change, environment and transport. Yeah, I'd like to also thank, I was at the scrutiny meeting. It was very useful debate. I think one of the main reasons for having this is, as we are aware now, that Shropshire per household or per person has presents with more waste than most areas. That being said, a lot of it is recyclable waste. The thing is, everything should be on the table to have a look at. It's interesting to have the comments from scrutiny first of all, but that's why we do need a waste minimisation team. We had one in the past; it was taken away. We're probably paying the price for that now, but I think it will be very useful. And thank you very much for the input you've had so far, and I'm sure it will end up being a spend to save. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And so the next stage is that Cabinet will now consider those points you've made, and a report will be coming to Cabinet in the near future. So thank you, Councillor Barrow. You may disappear.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to item number 5, which is public question time. We have no public questions today. Moving on to item number 6, member question times. We've got 6 questions. Some of them have got quite long answers, so bear with us. First question is from Councillor Rob Wilson, who's joining us online, but I have to say I'm quite curious to know where he's joining us online from. Councillor Rob Wilson.
Good morning. Yes, I'm joining you from Utrecht in the Netherlands, which happens to be a city where 60% of people cycle every day. So my question, hopefully you can hear me. Recently, Active Travel England asked local authorities to complete a self-assessment of their commitment and capability to deliver active travel schemes. Which tier did Shropshire Council place itself in? Did Active Travel England agree with this assessment? How much capability and revenue funding has been awarded? And what will Shropshire Council be spending its funding on?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Answering your question, Councillor Ian Nellens.
Thanks, Councillor Ian Nellens with the, again, climate change, environment and transport. Thanks, Rob, for your question. I think you probably are aware, maybe you weren't if you asked the question, but we are, Steve, we put ourselves in at level 1, and level 1 was agreed. And it's worth noting that the highest proportion of local authorities were also put in the level 1 category. Your question about how much capability revenue funding has been awarded to Shropshire Council as a result. The funding levels haven't yet been announced. Publication is expected of the Capability and Ambition Fund is expected in late October, early November of this year. And what will Shropshire Council be spending the funding on? In line with the Capability and Ambition Fund objective to build capability, 2/3 of the funding will be spent on building technical capability within the active travel team. That's relating to the school travel planning coordinator, so she can continue to develop and deliver Shropshire's school travel planning programme and the school streets programme, as well as the recruitment of an active travel officer. The remaining third of the funding will be spent on feasibility and design work for phase 1 of the Oswestry Cycle Network and schemes that were within the top 10 prioritised schemes in the draft LC Web. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nance. Councillor Wilson, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you very much. Given the recent developments in Downing Street over the last few days and weeks, is Shropshire Council independently committed to the government's target of 50% of journeys in our towns being walked and cycled by 2030? And will the council begin to commit its own capital funding to achieving that aim, rather than just relying on funding from Active Travel England?
Councillor Nance?
Well, as you are aware, we are keen to continue to develop as much as we can. Obviously, funding becomes an issue, but where we can and balance that out, we are prepared to go where we can to do as much with active travel as possible. What happens in government is outside what we can actually comment on at this stage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Nance. Question number 2 from Councillor David Basma, who's also joining us online, but possibly not from somewhere quite so exotic.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, not quite exotic. I'm at home, so. But my question is, will the Cabinet join Shropshire residents in opposing government plans to allow fracking?
And I will be answering that question, Councillor Basma. There's no doubt that we need to secure different types and sources of energy. However, it is also clear that this needs to enable significant changes to the energy market, but they cannot be at the expense of local communities nor protected landscapes. There are places across the country which support efforts to explore for shale gas, and it's been made very clear by the government that local support must exist and be proven. As far as I'm aware, in Shropshire, our communities do not support it, and we will back our communities. If we do receive any applications for fracking, they will be considered on their individual merits and assessed against relevant law, national and local policies, and all material considerations, as is the case with any planning application, and the matter of public support will be paramount. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Basma?
Yes, many thanks, Leader, for that response to my question. I agree that local views are important, but Shropshire Council should be providing a clear lead on the issue of fracking. Your response today is not a clear rejection. Would you be able to reassure me that Shropshire Council is opposed to fracking? And secondly, given that the use of land for fracking was not considered a possibility when the local plan was being written and consulted upon, would you back my suggestion that Council issue a supplementary planning document outlining its opposition to fracking?
I think you'll find, Councillor Basma, that as with many of these things, like applications in any sort of planning situation, we cannot predetermine anything that should come to us. It's like me sitting here saying, I don't agree with solar farms. I can't actually say that because the planning process has to be followed, which is what I've said in my final statement. So I'm not willing to agree to what you've said. We have to treat each individual application on merit. I don't want to find myself or the Cabinet find themselves in a situation where a developer of something is basically saying we have predetermined their application. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question, which is Councillor Roger Evans, who's joining us in the room.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Roger Evans from the London Division. I note the recent U-turns that have been made by the government and the increasing pressure they face on their budget. This includes the increasing need to trim future expenditure and put in place policies to ensure that climate change targets are met. We've seen in the press reports on how inflation is increasing the cost of all future construction projects. This was most recently seen when agreeing the capital funding needed to deliver a project at our last council meeting. The estimated cost of constructing the North West Relief Road was originally £80 million and is now years out of date. Using the examples above, it is likely cost will now be much higher than that originally quoted. Under the present arrangements, all costs over and above the original agreed budget will be met by Shropshire Council. Will the Cabinet agree that until an updated estimate of cost is published and assurances obtained from government to meet the extra project costs, instruct officers to stop all work connected with its construction? Finally, can Cabinet members be informed and the public how much so far has been spent on the North West Relief Road project, please?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Answering the question, Councillor Dean Carroll on behalf of Councillor Marshall, although of course until very recently, Councillor Carroll was the portfolio holder. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Evans. As is usual for projects of this size, the current work around planning consent, detailed design and the preparation of the full business case sits within a prescribed programme that leads through to constructor appointment and ultimately full construction. In order to deliver the project in a timely and cost-effective way, this preparatory work is key to its success and affordability. If work was to cease at this time in advance of construction, many opportunities for cost saving, accruing environmental benefits and the speed of construction would be lost. In addition to this, any delay at this time in proceeding with the agreed project programme would run the risk of incurring undue extra inflationary cost pressures ultimately with the delayed start date on site. It should be noted that the North West Relief Road will also add considerable increased opportunities for active travel and public transport uptake within Shrewsbury, as described in the outline business case of 2017. Further to this, its synergies with the Big Town Plan and other initiatives such as Mini Holland proposals ensures that the road aligns with and fully supports the Council's new Shropshire plan, particularly around healthy people, economy and environment. In doing so, it also remains in step with local and national ambitions around climate change and carbon targets. Conversations continue with the Department for Transport and other funders to address any potential cost increases due to exceptional, external and ultimately uncontrollable inflationary pressures. Further updates on this will be incorporated into the full business case on completion for consideration by members before its submission to the Department for Transport. Coming on to your second question, which was regarding how much has so far been spent on the project. To the end of the financial year 21-22, the total incurred spending on the North West Relief Road was £18.1 million, of which £10.4 million was Department for Transport grant funding. This is in line with the agreed terms of programme entry for the Department of Transport Large Local Majors programme and the Council's existing match funding commitment. The spend profile for the 22-23 year is currently being finalised with the Department of Transport and will be published as part of the full business case in due course.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Evans, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Chairman. I note the inflation rate is now again in double figures. Many are also saying that construction costs have increased by over 20%, even before this figure is taken into account. However, thank you for the answer to my question. It is noted in the past, member questions were answered and it was normal for all available information to be included in them. I note our Shrewsbury MP is quoting a figure in interviews, which means that the costs have increased by over £35 million, assuming government will meet 75% of the extra cost and Shropshire Council the other 25%. Is this realistic? Is he living in fantasy land, or is this Conservative administration living in the land of never never? Finally, I note the assumptions being made in your answer that it will go ahead. This even though there has been over 4,500 objections lodged, including from many local councils like Shrewsbury Town Council and Oswestry Town Council. Earlier this year, the figure being quoted was over £20 million having been spent. Now it is being quoted as 18. There are many better ways that this money could be spent, helping residents meet the cost of living crisis.
Question to this, or is this just
It is asking that is he sure that the figure is £18 million?
Thank you. That's
and
the question.
are there
Councillor
not some more up-to-date figures?
Councillor Carroll, I'll let you answer that one.
Am I sure that the figure spent to date up to the end of the financial year 21-22 was £18.1 million? That is the answer I have given you. Unless you're accusing officers of having drafted the answer of lying, then I stand by that answer. I also stand by the answer that further information on spend in the current financial year will form part of the full business case that will come forward at a later date.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Moving on to question number 4 from Councillor Peggy Mullock, who I think is joining us in the room and coming to the table. Thank you, Councillor Mullock.
Good morning, Councillor Peggy Mullock from Whitchurch North. It is clear that the cost of living crisis will have a significant impact on a large number of families and residents in Shropshire this winter and beyond. We know many families and residents will struggle to pay their bills, keep their homes warm and afford basics, including food, this winter. This has been likened to the scale of the problem of the COVID pandemic, with estimates from the Roundtree Foundation that the minimum acceptable standard of living for a couple is £43,400 between them. The impact on residents' health and well-being is predicted to be significant. I'd like to know what support is available locally for residents and what specifically is Shropshire Council doing to respond to the crisis.
Thank you, Councillor Mullock. To answer the question, Councillor William Butler.
Thank you, Leader. As members will see, there is a very long answer to this because there's been an awful lot going on, and we started the social task force group back in April. The actual full response to this answer is on our live webpage, so anybody who wishes to see it can actually get the full answer. I will briefly go through some of the poignant points. The Shropshire Social Task Force, organisations in Shropshire, have been working together to support residents through the cost of living crisis through a social task force chaired by the Executive Director for Public Health, Rachel Robinson. This task force brings together organisations to work in partnership to create a joint response to the cost of living crisis. Our partners include Citizens Advice Shropshire, Age UK, Marches Energy Agency, Community Resource, Shropshire Food Poverty Alliance, SALC, NHS representatives and many other key organisations who have been contributing via the task force and its subgroups, including the Hardship and Poverty Group and the Cost of Living Communications Group. Chair, with your indulgence, I would just like to say a massive thank you to all those organisations for taking the lead, and also for Rachel Robinson for taking the chair, and Shropshire Council being the enabler and coordinator of that group. But working together, we are working for the people of Shropshire. Cost of living communications. With our partners, we have developed 3 key messages we want all Shropshire residents to know. If you or someone you know is worried about money or struggling, right now you are not alone. There may be simple steps you can take to cut costs or maximise your income. If you are getting into debt or your mental health is suffering, do not wait to get help. The message is clear. Talk to us, talk to people, do not do it alone. We are encouraging residents worried about money to visit the cost of living help page for information on what support is available in Shropshire. Use the checklist to see if there are any steps that can take which may help them cope with rising costs. Use the worrying about money leaflet to identify which organisations Shropshire can offer support. We do appreciate that not everybody can go online. We're using Shropshire Local. There will be a leaflet coming out very shortly, and we will be launching a telephone helpline. But obviously digital is cheaper for the taxpayer and digital is the quickest way to get a response. But we understand that there is different people that need different ways. There is training for frontline staff and volunteers. I've mentioned the helpline, I mentioned Shropshire Local. There's Shropshire Warm Welcome. We are constantly updating our map which is on the help page, where all the warm welcome centres are around the county. I briefly, Chair, if you'll indulge me, as member for Clibbury Mortimer, I'd like to congratulate our town council who have actually coordinated it themselves. And they've done a really good job with all the local communities. We're constantly looking at data because this is going to be a moving feast. We might have the mildest winter on record. We might have the coldest winter on record. So we've got to be led by the data on this and not assume anything. We are lobbying our MPs. Money. The Household Support Fund has a budget of 6.266 million, which will be delivered by the end of March and has been over the last 12 months. We've been supporting children's meals in holidays. We've also been distributing the targeted payments of the Household Support Fund, which to date is 840,000. And as everybody is aware, we've also had the council tax energy rebates, in which our staff have actually given out 111,000 rebates while doing their day-to-day job. And I'd like to congratulate them and salute them for actually doing that. Our Revs and Bens team do an awful lot of good work under an awful lot of pressure. Well done. There's also the Affordable Warmth and Energy Efficiency Grants and supporting children via the Holiday Activities and Food Programme. Because of time, Chair, I'm not going to go into any more detail. The message is there. With Shropshire Council working alongside the wonderful voluntary community sector we have in Shropshire, we are here for Shropshire. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Mullock, do you have a supplementary?
No, but I'm pleased to hear that you're doing a leaflet as well as digital, because there are a lot of older people that just, they can't cope with.
We understand that.
Yeah, and to encourage people to use our mobile help when they go out to the towns.
Yeah. Shropshire Local.
Shropshire Local,
Yeah.
what it was called, sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullock. Yeah, I too would like to add my thanks to all the partner organisations that are working with this. It really is a Shropshire effort. So really good. Councillor, question number 5 is from Councillor Kate Halliday, which I understand is being read by Tim Collard. Unless, Julie, do you want to read the question, or are you happy for Tim to do it?
I'm fine for Tim.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Her question is this. On the 4th of October, Shrewsbury Town Council held an extraordinary meeting to discuss the proposed health and wellbeing hub. The meeting was very well attended by Shrewsbury residents, many of whom expressed concerns about the proposals and are worried that with such a large change to GP services locally, the only option to be presented at the consultation stage in April 23 would be to co-locate 6 practices together into one hub. Shrewsbury Town Council Health and Wellbeing Hub Working Group were disappointed that there was no representation from Shropshire Council other than public health when there were issues of planning and travel that the public asked questions about. Given the concerns of residents about the proposals and the engagement process, 2 questions. A, will Shropshire Council investigate the legality of the engagement exercise to date in accordance with the gunning principles? And B, will Shropshire Council actively investigate other funding options to support primary care estates with the practices involved in the hub proposals?
Thank you, Tim. Answered question, Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Councillor Cecilia Motley, the portfolio holder now for communities and health, particularly the integrated care system. I'd like to thank Councillor Halliday in absentia for her question. Firstly, to respond to the comment raised regarding the representation from Shropshire Council, NHS Shropshire Telford and Wrekin, that is NHS STW as it's known in common parlance, is leading this primary care development. Shropshire Council is one of a number of partners, and I think it's worth emphasising that point. The main role of Shropshire Council as a partner is to help identify any other alternative site options in the Shrewsbury area that meet the criteria for the site and scope potential transport options for all sites that the programme put forward. Until sites are identified, the transport need is not clear. Any future planning application would come to the council as the planning authority, and planning application would need to be considered against planning policy once submitted. The leader of the council, chief executive and executive director for health, wellbeing and prevention were all invited to attend to provide clarity on the council's role and provide the current position relating to transport and planning. It was decided that Rachel Robinson was best placed to represent Shropshire Council, given her role in the council and on the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, commonly known as HASC. At this stage in the process, until the site options are agreed or sites options, there is no specific detail or technical queries relating to planning or transport that can be provided. To be clear, at this time, the only information that could be given was to state the council's role, which was addressed in the meeting. At a future date, officers will be involved in the process and will respond directly to the specific and technical questions as appropriate. Public questions in advance of the meeting relating to SIL monies were responded to during the meeting. In terms of Councillor Halliday's request to formally investigate the legality of the engagement exercise to date in accordance with the gunning principles, this would require specialist input. Shropshire Council suggests that this question is brought to HASC at its meeting on the 31st of October 2022, and if required, independent expertise is brought in to support that process. However, should this require funding, a contribution would be requested from the Town Council. As with other primary care sites, with directions from the ICS, Shropshire Council can work with the ICS to investigate other funding options to support primary care estates, with the practices involved in the hub proposals. However, we cannot do this in isolation. Successful primary care estates projects require NHS support. It's for the ICB, that is the Integrated Care Board, to prioritise what investment is required and how the board may support and respond to that need. Where the demand for individual investment is high, the investment board, the Integrated Care Board, will work with our partners to determine the solution and priorities for investment. We understand that NHS annual primary care capital budget allocations are insufficient for large-scale investment. Current NHS budget allocations provide minor improvement grants for primary care premises only. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. And obviously, as Councillor Halliday's not here, we don't have a supplementary for that one. Moving on to the last question, Councillor Julia Buckley.
Thank you. So 1 year ago, the Cabinet Member for Highways categorically assured me and the other residents of Bridgnorth that our Highways depot was closing only temporarily due to some health and safety issues at another site. 1 year later, Cabinet is proposing a permanent closure to sell off the asset and plug a hole in the Conservative budget deficit. Since the closure, Bridgnorth residents have repeatedly vocalised their concerns about injuries arising from reduced gritting on strategic pavements to schools, inadequate quantities, slow restocking and inappropriate location of sandbags during flooding, slow responses to repair requests and reports closed down but not fixed by Highways maintenance, as if you recall we discussed in the July Cabinet and was conceded, and also dangerous potholes and pavement surfaces. The statistics published in the report's appendix relate to the increasing reporting of problems and do not address directly any of these issues. Furthermore, despite repeated assurances of the legal requirement to do so, there has been zero consultation on this proposal with the residents or town and parish councils. Can the Cabinet Member please explain to the residents why their concerns have been ignored? And why is the legal requirement for consultation not being fulfilled? And why were the locally elected Shropshire members for Bridgnorth not shown the report before it was published, despite copies being made available to the press 36 hours earlier? Within the report, the Director states at 7.27, from an outcomes angle for communities, engagement with all members as community leaders and through Cabinet and Portfolio Holder will continue to help the service and therefore the Council to ensure that information, feedback and concerns are raised with Highways and that actions may then be identified as necessary to mitigate any negative impacts. Does the Cabinet acknowledge that the overwhelming majority of Bridgnorth residents have repeatedly and consistently raised their concerns about the reduced service felt in the Bridgnorth area since the closure, not least including a petition of over 2,000 signatories? Referring to the paragraph 7.27, does the Cabinet understand that this abject failure to deliver adequate services in Bridgnorth has led to a very negative impact in terms of reduced public trust and confidence in this council?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Answering your question, Councillor Dean Carroll, who was the portfolio holder until very recently, on behalf of Richard Marshall.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Buckley, for the question. I would like to thank the member for Bridgnorth West and Tasley for her question. The report recommends that the depots be considered for repurposing, redevelopment or disposal, and as such local members will be consulted prior to any decisions on the future of the land, which as we speak has not been made yet, irrespective of any social media speculation by some. The residents' concerns have far from been ignored and each one has been investigated. Injuries caused by icy pavements occurred on areas that would have been out of scope for the conditions set out in the Council's Winter Service Operations Plan 2019, and so would not have been gritted even if the service had been delivered by the Bridgnorth depot. The head of Shropshire Highways has in fact been working extremely proactively with the headmaster at Castlefield School, and between them set up a trial scheme whereupon equipment has been supplied to the school and they are given access to the same weather forecasting that we use to action the highways gritting programme. This scheme has been well received by the school. Last year, Council agreed significant new investment into highways. All metrics have shown a vast improvement in maintenance, with more repairs being undertaken, more permanent repairs and a substantial reduction in the backlog of repairs than prior to the depot closures. The data provides absolutely no evidence that there has been any detriment to those services provided to the areas previously serviced by the depots, nor that the level of service for Bridgnorth is inconsistent with the rest of the county. As Councillor Marshall is a member for a division that was previously serviced by the Bridgnorth depot, he has confirmed that during many of his parish council meetings within his division, it has been acknowledged that there have been improvements in the maintenance programme over the past year. It would be disputed that the overwhelming majority of Bridgnorth residents have repeatedly and consistently raised their concerns about the reduced service in Bridgnorth area since the closure. Whilst concerns were raised regarding the perceived reduction in service prior to staff being transferred and the depots closed, there have been very few concerns raised about service issues since the depots were closed in October 2021 with any of the areas that they previously served, and none that would have resulted in a different outcome had the service been operated from Bridgnorth. Cabinet and Council has an obligation to ensure that taxpayers' money is spent in the most efficient manner possible, and therefore to spend between £2 and £3 million on refurbishing the depots to the standards required under health and safety with no benefits to the service provision is, as I'm sure the member for Bridgnorth West and Tasley would agree, not the most efficient manner to spend residents' money.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Buckley?
I do, yes. So I think what's striking about this response is how out of touch it is with the residents of Bridgnorth. While you dispute whether they are happy or not, they've delivered an overwhelming verdict 2 weeks ago in the Bridgnorth by-election with a swing of 15% away from this Conservative council, showing you very clearly how they feel about the cuts that you have served upon our town. The example that you give of Castlefield School is really interesting, isn't it? Because if they would like to have their path, the only one not on the hill, gritted, they have to have the gritting truck parked on their car park because they were told there's nowhere left in Bridgnorth where the gritting truck can park. So thank you for that example. My supplementary question is, what price tag has the depot site been valued at for asset disposal?
Councillor Carroll?
Thank you. Firstly, I would ask Councillor Buckley to provide the evidence that the school were told that there's nowhere else for a gritted park, because as a previous member responsible for highways, including winter gritting, that has never been raised or stated with me. So please provide the evidence of claims like that when you make them, Councillor Buckley. In terms of valuation of the site, no valuation, to my knowledge, has been carried out yet because we have not yet made a decision to dispose of the site.
So just to confirm, you're stating publicly no valuation's been sought at the site?
I have said, to my knowledge, Councillor Buckley, I will repeat, to my knowledge, No valuation has been conducted because we are not yet have made a decision to dispose of the site.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. That brings us to the end of members' questions. So as I said earlier on, item number 7 is actually erroneous because we haven't got 2 scrutiny items. Moving on to item number 8, the draft housing allocations policy and scheme, being presented by Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. Let's just move on to the next paper on the agenda. So this is a welcome and somewhat overdue review of the housing allocations policy. The thrust of this is to give greater emphasis onto the needs of our local communities as identified by the council. It's quite a straightforward proposal, and if I can just find the recommendations, recommendation 3.1 is to approve and adopt the draft policy, which came out, as I recall, some months ago for consultation when I was previously the cabinet member for housing. So it has been out to consultation. There were some very, very minor amendments made as a result of the consultation, but broadly it was accepted, and I hope council and I hope cabinet can agree to the draft report becoming substantive.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do I have a seconder for that paper?
Yeah, Councillor Simon Jones, portfolio holder for adult social care, public health and housing. I'm happy to second this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Leader. On page 10 at 5.2, it lists that there are just over 6,000 households on the present list, and all will need to be re-registered. Understand that. Can I have an assurance that it will not just be done digitally, because many, I would think, are not on the digital network, and any that have their position altered will be able to appeal that decision or have it looked into, please?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Carroll, can you provide an answer?
Yes, of course. Annual reviews and reapplications are perfectly standard on the existing process, but yes, absolutely to both questions. Applications can be made in paper form as well as digitally, and there is a right of appeal under both the new and the previous system for placement in bandings.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I didn't see any other hands, so I have a proposer. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to it's the Councillor Carroll show. Moving on to item number 9, draft tenancy strategy and policy for consultation. Councillor Carroll, get to his next piece of paper.
Thank you, Leader. Yep, just turning yet another page and waiting for my screen to load. This is, unlike the previous paper, this is requesting the policy document go out to consultation, the draft policy document. We did previously adopt a policy in 2015, so this is a refresh of that after 7 years. There's much that needed to be refreshed. The draft policy and strategy is attached at Appendix 1. I would hope that there's nothing that is particularly controversial in that, and I would move recommendation 3.1 that we put the draft policy out to public consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah, Councillor Simon Jones, public portfolio holder for adult social care, public health and housing. Again, I'm happy to second the proposal, the recommendation.
Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome it, and I look forward to the results and maybe taking it to a scrutiny committee for them to have a look and contribute before it is finally set. It is a request for any information that you may have, and it may need to be circulated later. But on page 82, it referenced that there were 3,420 in housing priority need, and 472 is listed as being statutory homeless. The information is, are any other Ukrainian visitors included in this list, and are we doing our best to ensure that they are housed in appropriate places and the children can attend the schools that they have started at already? It may be coming from left field on this, but I think it's important that we give assurances from this council that we are doing as much as we can.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Carroll.
If I may answer the second question first, in the terms of, yes, we are absolutely doing everything within our power and our best efforts to ensure the comfortable resettlement of Ukrainian families in Shropshire. In terms of the first question, if it's okay, I will refer to Laura Fisher, Head of Housing and Resettlement, as this is slightly more her world than mine.
Laura, are you able to join us? If you are with us.
If the technology
I can do. Yeah, the simple answer is I've not got that data to hand. Thanks, Dean, for just throwing it at me. But I absolutely will pull that together and I will get that circulated ASAP.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. I did think it might not be straight off the top of your head. I'd have been impressed if it had been, mind you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Motley.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, actually, Laura, how useful your regular updates are. Thank you very much for providing them for us. Because I'm still getting quite a lot of questions from my parishes about, whether they can help. And it's great to be able to give them some fairly up-to-date information. So thank you for that.
Brilliant, thank you.
I'm sure we'd all echo that, Laura. So just to clarify, Councillor Evans, it's whether any of the Ukrainian are involved in that. And you picked that up, Laura, okay. Thank you. Okay, so I have a proposer and I have a seconder for that report. All those in favour? Thank you very much. So moving on to item number 10, which is Adult Social Care Debt Recovery Policy. It's a joint report, I think, actually. Councillor Gwen Butler and Councillor Simon Jones.
Thank you, Leader. Members may recall back in the spring that I brought to Cabinet the debt recovery policy for council tax and business rates. And at that time, which was adopted, we promised to bring forward our policy on the adult social care debt recovery policy. So this is effectively housekeeping. The policy is the process that we've been following for a number of years. But in the light of transparency, I thought it was good to bring the policy forward. And obviously, we have to treat it substantially different to treating the council tax and business rate debt because it's people's lives we're playing with. And we do totally get that. But obviously, we still have to remember that 3% of our council taxpayers use the service, and we have to represent the 97% who doesn't. So we have to make sure that we do have monetary compliance on things. So I think it's pretty straightforward, Leader. I just moved the recommendation as stated. Members are asked to approve the new policy for debt collection of adult social care debts set out in Appendix A. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Do I have a second of that?
Yeah, I'm Councillor Simon Jones, portfolio holder for adult social care, public health and housing. I'm happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Question from Councillor Julia Buckley.
Welcome the report. I just have a query about point 12, which is the debt recovery agent. Are these the third parties that we've basically subcontract the debt collection to? Because in the past I have had complaints from residents that some of them behave in an intimidatory manner to vulnerable residents, and we did submit a formal complaint, but the problem was that the complaint couldn't really go to the council because it was a third party. Third party being a business had its own claim system, and the vulnerable person who'd already been intimidated then fell between two stools. So I do recall at the time asking that we review which debt recovery agent we use, but also just to review that accountability of them, because how can we keep an eye on it and report issues if they're not actually part of the council? Have I understood the right definition?
Yes, yeah, I get it, Julia. Yeah, I take on board. We sometimes, as a last resort, especially with council tax and business rates, we factor out the debt to debt collection agencies to actually collect on our behalf. I totally get your point, but there is a balance there between doing what's right for the council taxpayer and the person, because we do have a lot of occasions where people can afford to pay, but they just refuse to on principle. But I think where you've got individual cases like that, I'd be more than happy to take them on board and for us to look at them as individual items. But yours is the first case that I've heard today. Yeah, but if members, I'll put that out there, if members have specific items that they don't think that their residents have been treated, it would be up to our contracts department to put that contract out to actually go back to the supplier and say, hold on a minute, can I have your side of the story? And we will do that for you, Julie.
Yeah, you just take the words right out of my mouth. I think we wouldn't not want to be told. Because,
and it would only be last resort.
Yeah, that's always been our policy.
And it goes back to my mantra about all this. If you've got debt or you've got problems, don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Pick up the phone. You can pay a few £1 a week.
Yeah.
We can sort it out for you, but it will not go away.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much, everybody. You have to absolutely take that on board. Okay, so the next item is item number 11, which is the annual customer feedback complaints report. And as I said earlier on, unfortunately, Councillor Rob Gittins can't be with us today due to a bereavement in the family, but he has kindly provided me with a briefing note. So apologies, but I'm just going to read what he's given me. So each year the council produces an annual customer feedback and insight report which looks at overall trends in formal feedback the council receives from its customers, residents as well as MPs. Formal feedback covers complaints, comments and compliments that are formally submitted to the council via its customer feedback process. The council rightly views customer feedback as an important part of the service. Important part of service improvement, helping services identify where these can be made. In total, last year we received 2,743 cases of formal feedback, which is up 5% year on year, evened out some of the fluctuations in previous years resulting from the pandemic. Complaints account for just over half of these at 53%, with comments a third at 31% and compliments at 16%. Of the 1,200 complaints investigated by the council, it is important to point out that less than a third are upheld or partially upheld. Number of complaints in general are very similar to those received in 2019-20. Longer term trend is that complaints are up by 38% since 2015. Unsurprisingly, those services that touch the most people, such as highways, receive the highest number of complaints. In highways case, I'm pleased to confirm that the volume of complaints have actually reduced since last year, reflecting many of the changes that have been implemented in that service over the last year. The vast majority of complaints are answered within the council's target of 30 days. There are a growing number, however, of highly complex and detailed complaints which require longer to resolve. This and growing workloads for the staff has seen the average response time for complaints rise to 32 days. The median is 24, well within the target, but this is an area of focus within the recommendations requiring action. The report highlights improved visibility of compliant response times with senior managers to help address this, as well as a range of other measures to help improve service response to complaints. The Ombudsman. Cases referred to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman from Shropshire Council remain small compared for a council of our size and responsibilities. Numbers upheld has reduced to 42%, well below the level other similar councils see. Similar average local authority group is around 64. UPV complaints, which I think is something to do, there we go, unreasonable, persistent and vexatious. Finally, and as this is perhaps an indication of the times we live in, we have seen a tripling of the numbers of customers who we have had to make unreasonable, persistent and vexatious, which then restricts their contact with the council on specific issues for a limited period of time. We really do welcome genuine customer feedback, and this step is a last resort on issues where customers have received responses via formal channels but persist with their complaints. Increasingly, we see now a very small number of customers who are taking up a disproportionate amount of staff time on such issues. In the past, many services have been reluctant to use the council's unreasonable but vexatious something policy. So the report recommends that where it is appropriate to do so, this is more regularly applied. Rob also says here, my thanks to all the staff who are involved in the council's feedback process, particularly the feedback and insight and legal team who oversee the complaints process. So I am happy to propose that. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Kirsty Hurstnight, Portfolio Holder for Children and Education, happy to second.
Thank you very much. Roger?
Thank you, Lee. You answered some of the questions I was going to ask, and thank you for that, and thoughts with the cabinet member. But I note the local government commissioner is asking in 8.9 on page 138, recommend the council considers how and if it prioritises such complaints in terms of visibility and capacity. And I wonder if there could be an answer to that. And my final comment is that on page 156, I do note that of the MP inquiries, 45% were made by the south of the county, the MP from there, and 44% from the north of the county, and just 11% from the central area. Does Shrewsbury get preference? Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, I'm struggling to find that. So with in terms
on page 156, it says MP inquiries.
Right.
Appendix, Leader.
Oh, on the appendix.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. And it lists the MP inquiries, and it's quite stark,
Okay.
the difference between the three parts of the county. And I wondered, is there a reason, or is it just coincidental?
If what you're saying, I still haven't found it. If what you're saying is that there is a significant number of complaints from the north and the south, but actually the number of complaints in the middle are less, I think that's interesting, and it's something that I've been pondering for some time, because the situation is that certainly the member for Parliament for the centre area only makes a formal complaint or a formal application or email for information as a last resort. There is normally a question asked first, and it normally comes via the local members depending on where it is in the area. So for instance, he had been approached by somebody in my own division, and he approached me directly to ask that to be sorted. I'm aware that both the member for North Shropshire and the member for part of South Shropshire, but not all of South Shropshire, very often send a formal message in straight away. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if that isn't why the numbers are different. And actually, I would encourage our local MPs to go through the local member, because then everybody is cited on the issue as well. As far as your first point goes, Councillor Evans, it won't surprise you to know that I probably don't have the answer to that, but I will ensure that I get an answer from Rob to you as soon as possible. Councillor Julia Buckley.
Yeah, I just wanted to say how disappointing it is to see a rise of complaints, and I would say from our experience it's probably the overstretching of our staff that we've seen increasing over austerity, that the burden, the volume of work they're expected to do is just becoming ever impossible. So obviously it leads to escalation of complaints, and it's almost the same as you've just replied. That I think it doesn't just indicate perhaps stretched service delivery, it indicates, exactly as you've outlined, a lack of dialogue and early resolving of issues. And what a lot of residents say to me is, I've not had a response. It's not just they don't get a response early enough, they often just don't get a response at all. And so I wonder how many of these complaints could have been prevented or nipped in the bud if more officers were available or more time were available to respond earlier on to issues. My second point is, it's quite similar to the one raised by Councillor Evans, is why haven't we had a breakdown by the geographic areas of the county in this report? The data is available within our data set to set out how these numbers of complaints distribute across the geography. It's my same issue with the report by Mr. Barrow regarding the highways depot, but the statistics are provided globally, and actually what's required is a comparison in order for us to check whether there's any disparity. If we're not checking, how can we know that there's no disparity? So my request is that the next, because these come quarterly as well as annually through the Performance Management Committee, my request please is that the geographic distribution is included going forward, either for us to identify issues or to reassure us, I hope one day, that they're not there. Thank you.
No, I don't have a problem with that. It's quite easy to break down those complaints in. I think one of the things, if I remember rightly, was around the highways issues, which was quite interesting. that we always assumed that a significant number of the high-rise issues were actually rural, but they're not. So anyway, yes, I'm quite happy to ask Councillor Gittins to provide that information in the next report. I think that makes absolute sense. Okay, so we've got a proposal and a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 12, which is the financial strategy mid-year review. Councillor Gwynn Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Members, last Friday I was at the LGA in London where I work on the Improvement and Innovation Board. I took the opportunity to talk to members from several authorities across several parties, including Devon, Stoke-on-Trent, Rotherham, Nottingham and Northampton, as well as the LGA around the financial horizon. It is clear local government nationally is creaking like an old galleon, facing the worst financial storm of its existence. Talking to colleagues of other authorities, they appear to be less informed of the forthcoming financial storm and are asking government for help or tinkering on the size of their budgets while facing horrendous deficit in year and for future years to come in their own medium-term plans. I won't press it up. We are probably facing the biggest challenge to local government ever seen in recent years. But what I can say, unlike others I have spoken to, we have read the forecast and we are placed to make the changes needed to see us through the financial storm. Members, a lot of the challenge coming forward will be unpalatable, but unless we put this council on a sustainable financial footing as soon as possible, we will be dragged into a spiralling era of unwanted and forced decline. We have the confidence to face the storm, meet the challenge, and I am determined to deliver this council into a new arena of sustainability, which will enable us to focus on the Shropshire plan and spend well for the residents of Shropshire under that plan. In respect of the current update, members will be aware I have introduced a new level of transparency by bringing these updates for members regularly. There is a typo in 2.4. The gap should read 35.7 million, not 37.8. Inflation is still our biggest infection, along with COVID budget ceasing with pressures still in place. Leader, I move the recommendation the Cabinet notes the factors affecting the estimated funding gap for 23-24 and the steps proposed to close the gap and thereby set a balanced budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler, and I'm happy to second that. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman. I note in the report the reference about tactical budget work of £16 million is mentioned, and also mentioned on page 173, but there is no information behind it. When will members be informed about what this £16 million has actually involved? And I understand Councillor Butler's comments about councils facing the worst case scenario that many councils have seen ever for a long time. And the information coming from government does not seem as though it's going to help local government. On page 181, I note the peer review is mentioned, and when will we see the action plan setting out how the council is responding to it? And finally, I congratulate Cabinet members on their new revised portfolios and also say thank you to Ed Potter for his work. When, to aid tracking, will the finances attached to these altered portfolios be published, please?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Julia?
Yeah, so thank you for the report, and I think we appreciate you bringing this more frequently as the situation is so volatile. You state in the report that the additional pressures from inflation alone are at 23 million. I do hope that you use your time networking in London with your own Conservative government to explain to them the pain that they are causing to our residents and to your own council budget, and please lobby them to try and find a grown-up to sort out the mess they've got us into. I understand when you use the word unpalatable measures ahead, but like Councillor Evans, I want to understand what they are. All we hear are vague ideas about asset stripping but we don't have any specifics in front of us. £23 million is a lot of money to find under the carpets, while separately you're being asked to find another 9 million for a road that nobody wants. So I think we appreciate descriptions of the problem, but we need earlier citing, please, of the options that you are considering. If you would like to bring members with you, if you want us on board with the difficult decisions you have to make, can you please start articulating which options you are considering, so that what is going to be nasty doesn't have to be a nasty surprise. Thank you.
Councillor Butler?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Roger and Julia, for your comments. As I sit here, the assistant director teams are working on proposals and options that, and the start of that, Cabinet will actually see some of that for the first time this afternoon, and that will be the first part. And as soon as Cabinet has shown some sort of direction, I would imagine that the proposals will certainly be out by December in our budget review on how we're actually going to move things forward. I'm led to believe that the peer review challenge working plan, Roger, which you amended to, should be out very shortly, if I'm right, Jones, within the next week or so. So how we're actually delivering to that is paramount. Julia, I totally get it. Yeah, this doesn't matter what party you're in. This is about local people. Yeah, and you know, we have our meeting with our MPs on Friday. Believe you me, they will understand what we're hurting.
Can I listen?
So you know, and it'll be interesting to see what they have to say about it and their understanding, because like yourself, I think there is a lot of non-understanding going on at the moment.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I would add to that is that Cabinet is absolutely adamant that we are in control of our own destiny.
Yeah.
We are not relying on anything from government. We cannot. What we're hearing and what Williams heard on Friday is a number of councils are absolutely relying on the government to bail them out, and that is not going to happen. I can almost guarantee that. So we have to be in control.
I also say it's not an easy time to be in opposition at the moment, because if you do get the opportunity to get into power, there won't be any money.
You put it in a note.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll actually be less than no money, sorry.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere before. I think we're. Councillor Evans, go on, one more.
Right, thank you, Chairman. I note the realism that's in your voice, and I congratulate you on it, because in many reports that I've seen over the number of years, there has been reference about the fair funding coming down the line to us. I've raised questions about it, others have raised questions about it. I don't think it's coming, not in the near future. So it is time that we do actually have that sustainable budget and become a sustainable council, and not stay living on a fair funding formula that was promised, but now seems to have disappeared into the far, far horizon.
Can I just make one other comment, Chair? I will say to you now, as soon as we realise what our political decisions are, we will make them available to you, because we need to all be all in this together.
I would suggest the options before the decisions, so we can help.
That'll be your alternative budget, won't it?
The least worst outcome.
Yeah. Good luck with the alternative budget. We'd quite like to make an alternative budget, wouldn't we?
Absolutely.
Councillor Butler. Okay. I have a proposer and I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 13, business rates review. Councillor Graham Butler.
Bear with me 1 second, Chair. I've got to get my screens up. Thank you. Following on from my last report, I would actually like to present this as a good news story. In our actual questions this morning, we talked about what are we doing to help the residents of Shropshire in the warm hubs, etc. And the Cabinet totally get it, how important community assets and village halls, etc. are. We've just debated about our funding gap, but we are still committed to maintaining £357,000 of support for our communities in moving forward, especially in this financial year. So again, Chair, I'd just like to move the recommendation. I hope it will be unanimously supported. Now is not the time for change for those communities. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Butler. Do I have a second for that? I'm happy to second that one then. Roger?
Right, thank you, Chair. Can I welcome this report? There were reports last year about all sorts of scare stories. I can't think of another word to use for it, and this has kiboshed that. So I welcome that support continues, and it is good news for the many organisations to do it. But one question for myself, and that is that on page 202 it says approved relief in Shropshire, award village halls and community centres 100% discretionary rate. I know of a parish council that has a community centre, and I'm not sure whether they can claim a 100% rate or not. I don't know if any information can be made available, because whether it's because it's a minor local authority they can't do it or not, but it does say community centres and there isn't any explanation after it. Thank you, Chair.
What I would suggest, Roger, is if you throw the specific case to Phil Weir, he will actually do it. We have had instances in the past when some village community assets have had bars in them and they've been trading, that we couldn't actually give them relief. But they had to be full-time bars, if that makes sense, not the ones you just have in for a wedding party, etc. Yeah, so if you could bring the specific case forward to Phil Weir, I'm sure he'll sort it for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 14, school streets. Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight.
Sorry, I had problems with my microphone. Thank you. So today, happy and rather excited actually to bring this report to Cabinet to seek approval. School streets are streets outside of school gates that are pedestrianised except for permit holders during school drop-off and pick-up times. These streets will be implemented with a view to ensure that the child's safety is the utmost priority whilst reducing children's exposure to air pollution. With government funding and associated guidance, it makes it possible to explore safer school streets and a rollout across all of the schools in Shropshire. I want to thank the team, I want to thank Steve, Andy and Fiona for everything that they've done. We've had a lot of highways briefings and discussions over this. Especially, I'm really pleased to say that Rhiannon in the back, please stand up. Go on. Go on.
So we all know who you are.
We have worked tirelessly together to get this, and I really want to thank all your efforts to date. Lots of conversations with educational providers, governors, Academy Trust, you can imagine it, local members to get to this point. So thank you very much, thank you. With the change of legislation with the Department of Transport, it now enables Shropshire Council to apply for moving traffic offences powers and enforce school streets using automatic number plate recognition known as ANPR cameras. By using the cameras, a larger number of schools will be able to be suitable for this scheme, and once the powers are granted to Shropshire Council as a highways authority, we can enforce them. The lack of vehicles congested around school gates creates a safer space. We've seen the success of this at Colham School using this scheme, and we've seen the positive feedback, and we know now what we've got to do. We understand the engagement with schools, parents, children, governors are important, but it's also vital that we engage with our local residents. We will assess the displacement of traffic to neighbouring streets, but also the research shown it will implement a safer school street plan moving forward, not just as a pilot scheme, but working with highways for phase 1 and phase 2 and roll it out, as I've previously said. If agreed, the suggested 6 pilot schools will work with us to implement safer school streets. It will be over a period of 18 months. I've been asked why. If you know anything with the schools, you need at least 1 school academic year and a bit more. So, changing seasonal changes, we need that time to fully monitor the success of the scheme. And then a further paper will be brought back to Cabinet with the intention of rolling out further safer school streets. We're already working hard to support schools outside schools for safer schools on a number of schemes. Not to get this mixed up with the 20 miles per hour outside schools. This is just today the paper regarding safer school streets. So I'm happy to move the recommendations 3.1 to 3.4, and I suppose people will know the list of the schools that we've agreed. So We've got Woodside Primary School in Alpha Street, Market Drayton Junior School, Gabowen Primary School, Castlefield School in Bridgnorth, Midside School, Shrewsbury, Whitchurch Junior School, and an ADLC which said 6 schools, but we've also added the ANPR camera scheme to Colwyn. So thank you.
Excellent news. Thank you, Councillor Kirsty Hurst. Do I have a seconder for that?
Councillor Ian Allen is very happy because there's a lot of good points have been brought out in this one, encouraging active travel, encouraging lack of pollution around school gates, etc. And we're appreciate probably not one size fits all, but this will give us a good example of where it can be, and it's good to see it's across the county. Happy to second.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Chairman. It's most important and welcome the progress. It's an important step to getting more children walking, wheeling and cycling to school. So congratulations on that. It is disappointing, or a little disappointing, that it's taken so long since Councillor David Vasmer's motion in June 2020, and concerned that it seems to rely on funding from Active Travel Fund 4. It would be refreshing to see Shropshire committing some of its own capital funding to active travel schemes, and could this be found from using SIL? And finally, I've been involved with 3 parishes with ANPR cameras, Home Office approved, police approved, and I think we've done it a little bit cheaper. And I'm happy to share it, and the clerks of the appropriate parish councils will be happy to share that information if it helps reduce the costs and maybe enables more schools to come into the pilot. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. It answers your question very quickly about SIL. I don't know is the answer, so we'll find out on that one. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, just to welcome the report, and particularly to welcome the extra staff that specialise in this area. It's really welcome. And I know members from the Labour Group are really pleased that a couple of these are in their areas where they've been asking for a long time for something to be done, and so it's really welcome. I myself was out at 7:30 this morning as part of a volunteer group that puts traffic cones outside a school in Bridgnorth, which can't qualify for this scheme because it's a throughfare. And I know that that next tier of streets that can't be closed, I'm hopeful that the data from this pilot will also trickle down to them. And so look at, just as Councillor Evans says, how else can we use enforcement cameras also to support other schools? I don't think I know a local member who doesn't have this problem at their school, so this is really welcome, and thank you for bringing it about.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I have a proposal.
I just make a couple of comments. Obviously, SIL money could only be applicable on the evidence that we gain from this pilot, and saying it's not just the cameras, it's the cost of the signage and everything else needed. So we've got to get this pilot in place. I'm really pleased that we're working with schools, and actually work starts tomorrow, so thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, good news all round. I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Absolutely. Thank you. Moving on to item number 15, highways depot closures. Councillor Dean Carroll, on behalf of Richard Marshall, who unfortunately can't be here today, but as again said before, it was Councillor Carroll's portfolio until very recently. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. I've had a little chance to rest my voice since the last paper. So, back in September 2021 at full council, the then portfolio holder brought forward the proposal to temporarily close the 2 depots at Bridgnorth and Hodnett, initially on health and safety grounds, due to particularly, I think the most pressing issues were to do with the salt barns at both depots being unsafe. And at that point, the then portfolio holder pledged that we would do 12 months of full evaluation of the highways performance across all of the zones covered by those 2 depots before any long-term decisions were made on the future of those depots, and that decision would come back to members and not be made by officers under delegated powers. We've now done the 12 months of reviewing the performance. The performance actually in the zones affected, as in all of the zones, has increased, but in some of the zones affected has increased greater than in zones that weren't previously covered by one of these two highways depots. Refers specifically, or in particular, referred to zone 14, which was covered by the original highways depot, which has seen the greatest, both in real terms and percentage terms, increase in completed jobs of any zone in the county. The recommendation that the two recommendations that we're being asked to consider today are to note the formal closures of those two depots and to declare a surplus to highways requirements for the Bridgnorth and Hodnet depots. This would then release them back into the general fund, and it would be to delegate authority to the head of property and developments to agree and complete repurposing, redevelopment or disposal of assets as appropriate. So that is a further stage that would need to be undertaken after this cabinet decision, before the future of the depot sites was concluded. I think I'll probably leave it there and await the questions, but I'll propose recommendations 3.1 and 3.2.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Mellon, second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mellon. Councillor Buckley, can I just say, Councillor Buckley, before you ask the questions, we have already had your question earlier on, so please try not to repeat too much of what was in it. Thank you.
I promise I won't.
Okay.
So thank you for finally bringing this report to Cabinet. It is noted it was brought after the Bridgnorth by-election, which was interesting timing. I think it's important to remember that depots in Bridgnorth and Hodnet don't just serve the towns in which they are located. So closing the Bridgnorth depot doesn't just affect 12,000 residents in my town. You are closing the two in the east of the county. So the entire eastern flank of Shropshire no longer has a depot. That affects 120,000 residents. And the problem is that the impact has been felt across those areas. I have lots of issues with the statistics that you have used in the report. Why? So to say that there are more repairs in Bridgnorth indicates that more problems have been logged. Every member of this council agreed and voted to increase the highways repair budget to £8 million this year to try and catch up the chronic underfunding and neglect of our highways framework. So we all accept that this year more repairs have been done than the previous probably 3 or 4 years put together. We all agreed to that. The question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the difference between the east of the county, where there is no local facility, so no equipment, no supplies, no vehicles and no staff, compared to the centre and the west of the county? And if your report could show statistics which compared the number of complaints, the number of repairs and the time taken, so the average time taken to complete a repair in the east compared to the centre and the west, I would find that much more relevant and it would be much more convincing, because the issue I have from my residents is they log the complaints on Fix My Street. They do that for you because there are so many. They are told this has now been closed, but the pothole and the broken road sign remain. And then months, and I'm talking 6, 8, 9 months later, we nag and we request, and finally it is completed. So those relative, comparative times to get the job done is what matters, because we are further away from where the resources are kept. I have repeatedly, at every possible turn, tried to explain to you the impact this has on our town and our area. I think that you have ignored a petition of 2,000 people. Most recently, you ignored losing a very safe Conservative seat where the Labour member won against your own party. I don't know how many more ways we can log the concerns with this council. We have put complaints in, residents have complained. I've run out of ways to explain to you the impact on our town. So I leave you with this. The residents of Bridgnorth have asked me today to ask this cabinet not to permanently close our depot. I will report back what you choose to do to the eastern flank of the county and what you choose to do to our town. And in particular,
the Bridge North member that sits on this cabinet, we will be asking you, courtesy please, to make a vote today that will help our town and not hurt it. Thank you.
Councillor Butler wanted to speak first, and then I will say as well, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. It's almost if they were on different parallels and universes, or they weren't listening to my midterm financial strategy report. First of all, I'm Clibberry Mortimer Ward. I'm in the southeast of the county. I've seen a vast improvement from highways, and I'm very pleased that the whole of the A4.17 is going, well, not the whole of it, a big part of that's due to be resurfaced very shortly. It has been many years in the waiting. And also a lot of our rural roads are in the plan for the next financial year. As seen in the report, I would like Councillor Buckley to actually tell the people of Bridge North where the £2 to £3 million would come from to keep those centres open. And as we've seen a good increase in the delivery of highways, which I'm sure will continue, is it a good use of council tax money spent to keep buildings open when we have so many pressures in children's services and adult social care, where in my mind, rather than having depots and buildings, we need to deliver the outcomes for the people of Shropshire under the Shropshire plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I mean, the one thing I would say, Councillor Buckley, is that I think the overwhelming response to the depots was before when the depots were being closed. I think actually Councillor Carroll said in his report that since the depots have been closed, we have not seen a significant number of complaints. What I have seen is quite a lot of, forgive me for using the words, but I will, rabble-rousing, because I don't generally think people in Bridge North, and the ones that I have spoken to, some of them didn't even know they had a depot in Bridge North. And I think the situation is that if I'm right, and the officers are here, so they'll tell me if I'm right, this was actually an operational decision. This is not a decision that would have been made by politicians. It's an operational decision. Because of the petition that came to council, the then portfolio holder, Councillor Steve Charmley, said that we would give it 12 months to see how it went. And we've done that. Now, you're disputing the statistics. I'm sure Dean would say this, but I have faith in the statistics that have been provided. I don't think for 1 minute the statistics would be manipulated, is what I think you're suggesting. I think the situation is, in all honesty, that regardless of whether we vote to close the depot, it will not reopen. Because, frankly, I do not think this council can justify spending £2 to £3 million on two facilities. Well, actually, let's not forget about Hodnet. But actually, what I will say about Hodnet is we have had one comment about Hodnet, which was somebody said it should never have been there in the first place. Please close it immediately. So I can't see how we can justify spending £2 to £3 million of capital monies on a facility that is not going to reopen, because Kia, our contractor, have made it very clear that the service provided by the 3 depots that we currently have across the county actually is an improvement on what we used to have when we had 5 depots. So how can you ask this cabinet to make a decision to spend monies on a service that has improved since that facility closed? I just do not understand your reasoning behind that.
If you'd like me to respond.
Councillor Carroll, you wanted to come back first.
Thank you, Leader. Yes. In terms of Councillor Buckley's request for wanting to know how much more the area service, and let's be frank, you're asking about the area served by the Bridge North Depot.
So the southeast of the county.
You're asking about zones 10, 14, 15 and 16.
Correct. Yeah.
You're asking how much more that has increased than other zones.
No, I really would like to be clear, because I feel as though you're
what are you asking?
Misunderstanding what I'm saying. So the statistics that you're quoting are not false, Councillor Picton. They're just not the relevant statistics.
What are the relevant statistics?
The relevant statistics are the length of time it takes to repair problems in those areas compared to the east of the county. And just going back to Councillor Butler, I agree with you. Collectively,
Sorry,
£8 million
I thought I was
proactive.
answering this question, not
Yes,
allowing yet another diatribe by Councillor Buckley.
But so we need to be specific about reactive repairs. You two are talking about two different arms of highways, as you very well know. Resurfacing the road is a planned schedule.
Would you like a response, Councillor Buckley, or are you content to play to the gathering continually?
I'd like the response to be pertinent rather than blurring.
Would you like a response, Councillor Buckley?
I'd love an accurate one.
Thank you. In that case, I will refer you from Appendix B, which is the figures you were previously quoting, to Appendix C, which breaks down jobs completed during the time set out in the policy and late. I also refer you to Appendix D, which is contractors attending emergencies on time.
I'm not talking about emergency, I'm talking about reactive repairs, the opposite of resurfacing the road. Repairing a broken road sign, repairing a broken pavement.
Do you understand? Do you understand what these figures are showing that I'm quoting back to you?
An emergency is an out of hours issue rather than a day-to-day problem.
And Appendix C in terms of completed jobs?
Completed jobs. So this is the number of jobs that residents have raised with you.
Yes.
The number of problems per area. You're confirming to me there are more problems in the southeast. I concur completely.
And they are completed.
Some of them have been completed.
These are completed jobs.
But where is the timescale?
These are showing, Councillor Buckley.
I would like
if
to know
you will
the
have the
average
respect
timescale.
to listen to the answer, please, Councillor Buckley. Thank you. These are showing completed jobs.
And what is
These
the
are not.
timescale?
That is, in bold figure, in bold bars on the chart are those completed within the timescale set out in the policy. Those in the pastel colours are those completed outside of the timescale within the policy.
So, as you know, your data set gives you an average number of days per job completed. So it is within the grasp of our data team to state the average time to complete a job in Zone 10 is X, the average time to complete jobs in Shrewsbury Centre is Y. And what would be more useful is to compare the average time to repair somewhere where there isn't a depot compared to where there is, because £500,000 that you're describing has been used to invest in the Shrewsbury depot. So it's not a question of whether or not we invest in depots. The only choice that you have made is which depots you have chosen to invest in. And your vote today is a choice.
Buckley, the issue of facilities with services.
No,
you are conflating the issue of facilities with services. You are encouraging the spending of capital money on facilities which have no bearing on the delivery of services over the decision to invest that capital money in the delivery of highway services through the capital maintenance programme. Then where are you?
In the Longdon Highways depot.
Which would have been necessary anyway.
It was required because you transferred staff from the periphery into the centre. It was a choice.
Okay, Councillor Buckley, I think you know we're not going to agree on this. We're never going to agree on this. But what I would absolutely state is we cannot justify spending funding on facilities that would not reopen. Full stop. They will not reopen because the contractor has made it very clear that well, they were clear from the start. They couldn't even understand why we had 5 depots. So this depot will not reopen because Kiel will not use it. What on earth is the use of us having that on our books? Councillor Butler. Councillor Butler.
I would just like to mention, I'm a little bit disturbed at the attitude of Councillor Buckley to Councillor Ersnight, and I find it quite intimidating in a public meeting. You know, there is ways to manage oneself when dealing in such a circumstance, and it's almost verging on bullying.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. What I would say is that Cabinet takes this decision as a Cabinet, not as individuals. So, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. If I can continue with my previous comments, that as you said, Leader, the decision is whether to refurbish buildings that will not be used because the operational decisions made by our term maintenance contractor, Kia, when they came in to our term maintenance contract, I believe their response was no county of this size has 5 maintenance depots, it's completely unwarranted. They are the technical professional experts, far more than you or I, that will make that judgment, and they have term maintenance contracts across the county. Their decision was that they would not operate from two of those. In consultation, those two were two that needed the highest level of capital maintenance to keep them open, and that was an operational decision that they took. I believe what you're asking us to do is to invest £2 to £3 million in two facilities, which you have already been told will not be reopening operationally, as a term maintenance contractor whose workforce operated out of there do not believe that they fit within their operating model.
That is if the contractor decides what this council does. We have a contract with them. We have a break clause in that contract. They may not always be our contractor, as we've already gone to a wider pool and a mixed portfolio of contracts. So yes, if you are entirely beholden to one contractor and you must do as they say, I can understand why you feel that you have no choice. We heard earlier today that you are in charge of your destiny, that you've broken links with your own government because you will decide how to manage your own budget. It is a choice by every member round this table whether or not to close that depot. We instruct our contractors.
If I can continue.
Yeah,
And no other term maintenance contractor coming in will consider 5 depots for this size of county to be operationally necessary.
You've made
It's
a cost-saving exercise. You've made that very clear.
This is not a cost saving.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carroll. I'm going to bring this debate to a close because it is absolutely ridiculous what is being suggested here. The decision has been made. Cabinet have already discussed all of these elements right from the very start, Councillor Buckley. It's not something we've done on a whim. I do wonder how much fuss you would be kicking up if it was a depot in Shrewsbury. However, I have a proposer for this report. I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. And I will be watching the social media with interest.
It's a public meeting and that is a public vote.
I wasn't referring to the public meeting and the public vote. Okay, moving on to item number 16, which is Community Asset Transfer Policy Update 2022. Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Thank you, Leader. This is hopefully slightly less exciting topic than the one we just covered, and hopefully less controversial as well. I'm Councillor Cecilia Motley, a portfolio holder for communities and health. This is suggesting to members that it's about time we updated and sorted out our community asset transfer policy. The policy was originally put in place by the Cabinet in October 2012, and apart from minor amendments in 2017, it's been operating in exactly the same way. This is something that we are very keen to try and encourage communities and voluntary organisations to try and get involved with, because we feel that it will strengthen the sustainability and resilience of some of the communities if they can purchase assets, as long, obviously, as though as long as they are in a position actually not just to sustain them but make them viable and continue to make them thrive. So what we're trying to do here is we're just basically trying to refresh the policy. We're trying to remove unwanted information, which is slightly cluttering it up. We're going to make it shorter, so it goes down from 36 pages to 16. Basically, transfer proposals measured against criteria including community benefit, safeguarding or creating new opportunities for local services or activities, while supporting the Council's objectives. What we're going to do with the pages that we remove is not put them on the bonfire so much as actually just put them on the website, so that it means that when we have interest expressed in this, that people aren't faced with quite such a bulky policy. I've had a number of my communities that have got involved in community asset transfer ideas. very often local pubs which are coming up for closure, and the communities are very keen to try and take them over. However, once they get into the detail and the complications, it rather daunts them. So I think if we can make this rather simpler, offer them advice. And I know that Dean's area, or I think it's still your area, isn't it, Dean? Asset management team are organising all this and working with the voluntary sector and with local communities to see them through this. And I'm very hopeful that as a result of this, we will actually see more community transfers rather than fewer. So if I could ask Cabinet, please, to accept the recommendation in under item 3.1 to approve the proposed update to the community asset transfer policy as laid out in the appendix. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Do I have a second for that?
All second. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you. I will also welcome this report. Having sat with a few of my community groups and worked through the paperwork, I'm really pleased to see that some of the individual bits have disappeared out of this this year. Okay, I don't see any hands. All those, well, I have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the last item for today, item number 17, which is the NHS Shropshire, Telford and Reading governance arrangements. So I'm going to be presenting this report. The report itself provides an overview of NHS governance change in establishing the integrated care system in Shropshire, Telford and Reading, and seeks endorsement for the governance arrangements relating to the integrated care partnerships. Your members will be aware that as of the 1st of July, we are now part of the integrated care partnership Shropshire, Telford and Reading, and we have an ICB, which is an integrated care board, and we also have an integrated care partnership. So if you like, the easiest way to describe this is that the ICB, which is the board, replaces the clinical commissioning groups, and the ICP is a joint committee which includes members of the board, but also from the local authorities. There's been a significant amount of work undertaken on the terms of reference and governance arrangements over the past months, including an enormous amount of toing and froing. I'm sure our Director of Public Health will agree with me on that. And all parties are now in agreement. The draft was presented to the inaugural meeting of the Integrated Care Partnership Board last week. And Cabinet is now being asked to approve the following recommendations. I will read out the recommendations because I think they are actually quite important to note what exactly we are asking for. So we are being asked to endorse the nomination of the Chief Executive of Shropshire Council as a voting member of the ICB. We note that the leader or cabinet lead as a deputy will be invited to the ICB meeting as a non-voting participant, i.e. we sit there as an observer. We agreed to the establishment of a joint committee known as the Shropshire, Telford and Reading Integrated Care Partnership and approved the terms of reference as in Appendix 1. We agreed to the appointment of the leader as the co-chair and voting member of the Integrated Care Partnership representing Shropshire Council. And we agreed to the appointment of the cabinet lead as a voting member of the ICP representing Shropshire Council. And then it also goes on to say that there are a few more people that we would like to see invited as members of the ICP, which includes the Chief Executive, includes the Executive Director of Public Health and the Executive Director of Children's and Adult Services, in our case our Exec Director of People, and the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board for Shropshire. So that's all laid out within there. It is a bit of a technical report, but it's obviously one that we need to get right and to put in place as soon as possible. So I'm happy to propose that. Do I have a seconder for that one?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. And I do have some comments, but I think it may be best to talk to you separately about it rather than this, because I do recognise that it's an agreement that's been made with a number of different organisations, including Telford and Reading, but there does seem to be a variety of different models that are being introduced in different areas of the country. And I do have some reservations about the model here, and I see it's going to be revisited in the not too distant future. So I think it would be useful to have a discussion outside of this meeting sometime in the not too distant future.
Yeah, quite happy to do that, Councillor Evans. I think I sit on
a group of all of the ICP chairs, and there are a number of different models, and there are some that have changed already. So I think there will be some movement in this, shall we say? But I think it was just important from our point of view to actually get something in place that we were all in agreement with. So unless anybody else has any,
Can I just
yes, of course you can.
just comment on the fact that this is a very young setup, as it were. It was only agreed in July, so we haven't had a great deal of time to get it into shape. So I absolutely accept what you're saying, Roger. But I think what we've got to do is try it as we've recommended today, and see how it works. And if it obviously isn't working, well, then we're going to have to revisit it. You know, this is not at the moment set in stone. But we've got to start somewhere, and this is how we feel we can make progress.
And I think it's worth saying, Councillor Evans, in case you're not aware, well, I'm sure you probably are, that the Integrated Care Board meetings are public meetings. So you can always. I'm not sure. I'm looking at Rachel. I'm not sure if they're streamed. I don't think they are. They are online, so you don't have to tip up at the football board next week if you don't want to. Thank you. So I have a proposer and a seconder for that. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time today. That's the end of Shropshire Council Cabinet meeting from the 19th of October. Thank you very much. Okay. I just want to really thank both tonight.
Yes, Anthony Compton one, help in the reading, help in the reading, which one's been non-watched. Oh, I'm a crossroads on the issue.